'tis many's a gay night, from dark till daylight, I spend with people of high renown. But in all their grandeur and heaps to squander, my heart would wander for sweet Omagh town.
And a very good evening to you, and a very warm welcome again to Sweet Omagh Town Internet Radio. Music from the heart of Omagh and interviews from as far away as we can get. I hope to be talking to Declan Ford on line 1. Hello, Declan.
Yes, Declan Ford is here in Mountfield on line 1.
And we're calling our very special guest tonight, Roy Ward, on line 2.
Roy Ward is here in Carrickmore in Omagh.
Well, how are you, Roy?
Fine, thank you.
Good.
Suffering like everybody else, having to sit in the house.
Hey, you know, who was it that said, was it Dennis Healy says we never had it so good, was it? Who was it? Declan, do you remember that?
That was Macmillan.
It was Harold Macmillan, was I? wasn't sure, right?
Yes, Harold Macmillan, yes. We never had it so good.
I wouldn't go back that far.
No, you do. You probably don't.
Well, tell me this, Roy, are you playing much music this weather in the house?
I'm doing a wee bit, actually. There's a programme on RTE there about 9 o'clock in the evening, and I'm sort of taking the bass guitar out and playing along with it for a bit of crack.
Right.
And then I'm taking the sixth string out now and again and singing an odd song to myself to keep the vocal cords going.
Uh-huh.
Very
Well, what are you singing this week? Gospel stuff or?
No, Gordon Lightfoot has always been a hero of mine, if you like. I would do a lot of his stuff and stuff out of the 60s and 70s.
Aye. Well, funny, that was the first recording I ever heard of me and Bobby McGee, was Gordon Lightfoot's version. And I think it started with the windshield wipers of the car, just to get the rhythm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that was the first time I ever heard Gordon Lightfoot as well.
Well, Gordon Lightfoot during the Troubles now, in fairness, came to Belfast a number of times.
Uh-huh.
I saw him a number of times there in Belfast.
Is he Canadian, Roy, or is he? Or American?
Yeah, he was Canadian, yeah.
Yeah.
He is Canadian.
Yes.
That's right. Did he sing recently, and was it in Dublin or maybe 2 or 3 years ago? I think
not sure, but he had
but
health
only
problems there for a while.
Yeah. Well, you know, one of my big regrets, Roy, when I was a student in Belfast, Sonny Terry and Brownie McGee played in Belfast, and I hadn't the wit to go to see them.
But sure, hindsight's a wonderful thing.
Oh, sure, isn't it? It is indeed.
But,
hindsight is a dangerous thing,
yeah.
I think.
How
The last concert I went to actually was Chris Christopherson in Derry.
Right, the Millennium.
The Millennium, isn't it?
Uh-huh.
No, I was disappointed now, to be fair. That's 3 or 4 years ago.
Aye.
And he sort of missed a few things, if you like, and lost a few words and so on. So it sort of took the edge of it.
Aye, well, I went to see him in Dublin in the Olympia, and I think the concert was due to start, I think, at 7:30, and I think he came on about 10 to 8, and I think by 9:20 we were waiting outside. The concert was over.
Yeah.
You know, but it was the tail end of a European tour, and you know, I suppose to use the vernacular, he's no spring chicken. You know,
No.
And what a songwriter!
Yeah, absolutely.
What a songwriter, you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Can't sing, can't play the guitar, can't play the harmonica, but when he's on form, he can hold an audience in the palm of his hand.
The last time I saw him in Belfast, he said, "Don't sing along with me." He says, "It's not your fault." In other words, he couldn't keep up with us. He couldn't keep it in key. But I get what you're saying, Roy. But I think just the fact to be in the room with him and to see that iconic guy on stage, I think, you know, you do give him a wide berth, because I mean, he's been around the block so many times.
Yeah.
And what about music?
But if you look back at that era, those guys, you know, the Highwaymen, Johnny Cash, Merle Haggard, you know, Willie Nelson. There'll never be anybody like that again.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway.
Will there be an Elastic Band, Roy? That's what we want to know.
No, we'll not be going there.
Come on.
The Elastic Band's long gone.
Okay.
That was in the 70s.
Because that's our era, for goodness sake. I remember you very well now. You done a lot of relief work that time as well, I think, for bands, didn't you?
We did a fair bit.
Yeah.
In fact, probably our biggest date of the whole lot was Fintra in outside Killybegs. We used to do relief there on a Sunday night, and that was always our biggest payday.
Right.
And at that time, there was 4 of us: Kevin and his wife Ruth, myself, and Mildred Houston, sister of Claire's.
Yes.
And we used to travel down there in Kevin's VW camper van thing with all our gear in it. And 2 of us would sleep on the way down and 2 would sleep on the way home. But I remember one night being in there and we were the relief band. But a wee guy, I think it was Bill Hayden, we called him the drama. He produced the sheet music for a 14-piece band and said, "There's a woman coming here tonight as the star performer and you're backing her." We sort of looked at him. I'll never forget it.
Oh, no, right.
That's Bill Hayden. He used to play with American Pie.
Who does?
I don't know.
Wee small guy played an alto sax.
Yes, he, very Italian-looking guy. He was the son of Terry Hayden.
Right.
He used to do the travelling road show around here.
Right.
And I met him. He lived, I think, in a Ballinode in Monaghan.
Yeah.
And I wrote a poem about Clary Hayden. And at this concert, I was doing a wee turn in it, and Bill was the compere. And I had the pleasure of giving him a copy of the poem. And he died maybe about 2 months later.
Yeah. Anyway, right, the reason we are talking to you tonight is, I'm not sure if you knew, but Declan and I have been collecting oral history around Omagh for as long as we care to remember. And some years ago we took a little recorder into your mum's house, had a wee chat with her, and then we sort of unearthed these CDs during this sort of lockdown, and we put them up on a sort of fairly regular time frame when we can. And if you don't mind, we're going to use the one recorded with your mother, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, not a problem. I remember you doing it at the time, and that's the time we had Strula FM going. And I remember Declan saying to me after he'd interviewed her that he said he had never met a woman who had a happier war. And I've never forgotten that comment.
Yes, the lady with the happy war is right, yeah.
Oh, yeah, but she had a phenomenal memory.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Oh, dear. And just you went, when she talked about what it was like to go over to England and then to be to end up in Hyderabad in the palace there.
Yeah.
You know, it was just like a door opening on another world.
Well, I actually have never heard the recording.
Oh.
Never heard it.
Right.
So I'm looking forward to it myself.
Yes.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
You know?
She was a remarkable lady. Tell us about her, Roy, in your own words.
Well, I suppose she grew up in Carrickmore. If you get down to the bottom of Carrickmore, just before the school on the left-hand side, there's a big house which is nearly derelict now. It was called Glenview.
A big Georgian house on the left there, yeah.
Yeah, that's where my mother was raised. She went over to England. She was just 18. Her parents did not want her to go, but she said she was going to sign up, and that was it. She disappeared and went over to England and joined up, if you like. But she came home on holiday at one time, and her father was a great shot, and he had actually gone out and shot a few rabbits, and he'd given her a rabbit to take back to England. So she put this rabbit into her gas mask and was heading back over to England anyway, and get off a boat or a train or something somewhere, and a guy stopped her and said, "What have you got in your gas mask?" Of course, my mother, nothing. The boy said, "Open your gas mask." Open the gas mask. Here was a rabbit. But she was taken over to feed.
Gosh.
And she got the rabbit confiscated. But the upshot of that was that somebody on the site where she was working at that time got to hear about it. And there was a guy who used to do caricatures, and he did a caricature of my mother in uniform with a rabbit sitting in the waste paper bin looking out over the top at her. So I still have that caricature sitting here in my house.
Oh,
So every time I look at it, I smile.
Yes. And did you talk much about the war to you, Roy? Or was that something you kept private, or do you think?
No, she never chatted too much to me about it at all, to be quite honest. My father, he was in the Merchant Navy, and he was torpedoed 2 or 3 times. But he used to sit, whenever we were living in Carrickmore Gardens, he used to sit in a chair, and every now and again he'd go, oh, and he'd pick a wee bit of shrapnel out of his leg.
Get away.
And
Yeah.
I sort of passed no remark on it, but
Yeah.
what they went through must have been horrendous.
Yeah.
At least what he went through must have been horrendous, I think. As Declan says, my mother had a happy war, but I don't think my father had.
No, for those who don't know your father was a teacher in the Omagh High School.
That's correct, yeah.
Just because those two people who don't remember him, I remember him.
Yeah, Alston, Alston, but nearly everybody called him Austin, although his name was Alston.
Ulston, yeah.
Strange name.
strange name, a very unusual name.
An Omagh family, Roy, as well?
No, we actually originated in Derry.
Right.
My great-grandfather came over from England as the first paid chorister in St. Colum's Cathedral in Derry. And his baton, actually William Ward, his baton is in the museum within St. Colum's Cathedral.
Oh,
So that's maybe where some of the music came from.
right.
You know, so,
Interesting now, isn't it?
yeah, it goes back a long time.
Yeah. What brought you to Omagh then, do you know? Or
Well, my mother was in Carrickmore. My uncle Dick, who used to have the monumental sculptures in Market Street, I suppose
yes.
he offered me dad a house above the shop, if you like.
Right.
And I
Okay.
suppose whenever my dad and ma get married, Omagh was the obvious place to be.
Mm.
You know, and then my mother was a workaholic. She could have had 3 jobs going at any one time. She worked in the Western Education Library Board in the finance department, and she also worked as a telephonist in the telephone exchange. And then whenever we lived in the Dublin Road, she ran a B&B as well, whenever we were out there. So she was never
They were idle? No.
sitting on her hands, as the man says.
Oh, dear.
Remarkable woman.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Aye.
Yeah. I think you'll enjoy the interview, Roy. The story she told, and then she had a box with a few items from the war in it, and her eyes would just light up when she took the various bits and pieces out.
Yeah.
And she was back again as a young girl of 18 or 19 in Hyderabad.
Yeah, yeah.
And to hear her talking about the dance, the tea dances that they would go to, it was a real honour and privilege to talk to her. She was a fascinating storyteller as well. Oh, she's a great woman altogether.
Well, I don't know if you remember, but how long ago was it now? 2005. There was a thing run by the British Legion, whereby there was a thing called Help for Heroes, and it was the 60th anniversary of the Japanese surrender.
Yes.
Now, my mother was in Singapore for the Japanese surrender on Lord Louis Mountbatten staff,
That's right.
and I went out as her carer, if you like, with her to a do for the 60th anniversary of the Japanese surrender in Singapore. And my brother Kevin and his wife came up from Perth in Australia. We spent the weekend together and went to the British ambassador's place for afternoon tea and all that kind of thing.
Oh, very nice.
But that evening, we happened to be coming down the road in a taxi. And my mother said, "Is this Orchard Road?" I says, I think it is, yeah. She says, "I used to drive 3-tonners down here."
Wow. Yeah.
And I laughed because I wouldn't let my mother drive a nail into a lump of wood.
Oh, lovely. It just shows you now.
She'd never done a test in her life.
No.
Oh, dear.
You never did in those days. No, Roy. You just applied to the post office with your 5 shillings and away you went, I think. So,
Yeah.
Anyway, without further ado,
Oh,
Roy, thanks for taking part here, and hopefully we'll enjoy this, and say hello to Kevin if you're talking to him as well for me. Roy, you have another brother in London as well, haven't you?
The young brother Brian's
Brian
in
as
London.
well. Okay.
He's in lockdown at the minute.
Aye, sure, aren't we all here? You know, you and I can nearly shout to each other, Roy. I'm but less than a mile from you as a crow flies, but I haven't seen you in weeks and weeks. So.
Donkeys.
Ah, sure, it's the way it is. Anyway, keep practising, as I said. Don't be buying any more guitars either, Roy. Would you not? Until we see you.
No. Stop that, carry on. I'm selling this other.
Good man. Okay, once again, you are listening to Sweet Omagh Town Internet Radio, and our thanks again to Roy. Roy, thank you for taking part in our programme tonight, and sit back and relax, and we'll enjoy the company of the late and great Amy Ward.
Our aircraft went out, you see, over Burma, Rangoon, Java and all these places, and they took photographs. They had these big cameras on the planes, and they took the photographs. And then they came back. That was brought into this office here inside Hyderabad, and it was interpreted then by the interpreters as to what they were. It could be railways, factories, or whatever it would be, you know. And then our job was, we were in the plotting section, and we had to plot, but in the plotting section it was so intense with my eyes I couldn't see, so I moved out into the library, and they had this print library where all these photographs were kept, you see. And well, that's more or less what the job was. Well, there was a very secret place called the 7B it was called, and they did mosaics of these things.
Right. They pieced them all together.
Pieced them together and made mosaics.
And the photographs, where would they have been taken? Would they have been taken
The
in that
photographs were
vicinity?
taken all over as I say, Burma, Java, Rangoon,
That whole area?
all that area.
Massive area. And then
Sangoon,
you were responsible for piecing them together,
and we were, yes,
and then interpreting and reading the photographs.
interpreted as to
there.
what they were, and then they were plotted as to the distance between
Oh,
that
yes.
sort of thing, you see.
Well, then the palace. But when you came to the palace, I presume that a Maharaja or a member of that class in India would have lived in it, but they had left by that stage.
Oh, they had left,
Right.
and the RAF had taken it over
Oh, I see.
just for our time while we were there.
Right. And they had no. Did you see any of the Maharaja or his family about it all? Did they?
No.
It was all military and RAF.
But we had very secret passes to get in and all this sort of thing, you know.
And was it almost an entirely female work?
Oh, no. That's just, these are all men.
Right.
These are more interpreters. We are more or less clerical staff.
Oh, I
you know.
see. Right. And how did you train for that?
Well, we just trained when we got there, you see.
And then, well.
Well, most of us, we were all clerical staff, you know, typist and secretarial work and that sort of thing. And we were the ones that were chosen to go to India.
Right.
And I happened to be one of the lucky ones, I suppose.
Right.
And there was, in our office, there was two girls. There was Marjorie from Dublin, and there was Marion from Belfast, and myself, and we were the three Irish girls in the plotting section.
Right.
So it was quite interesting, really, you know.
What was the atmosphere like?
Oh, terrific.
Because you were all
We're
over
all
the age.
one, and there was no difference made in your rank or anything. We were all just one big happy family.
Right.
Our commanding officer was Glyn Daniels, and he was a lecturer at Cambridge University. He was Prince Charles's tutor, actually. And he was our commanding officer. And then we had the second one, he was squadron leader, York Radley. He was second in command.
Right.
So,
And you had to wear a uniform all the time?
yes, we had to wear khaki.
Right. Could you describe the uniform? What was it like?
Well, we just wore khaki bush shirts
Uh-huh.
and khaki skirts. And in the evening then we could wear khaki slacks.
Right.
And when we went out we were given topies. But then they took those away and gave us bush hats.
Right.
So,
What's the toupee? What was it?
well, you know, the hard,
Oh,
the
yes.
hard hat.
The hard hat. Right.
So then they gave us a...
And could you give me some idea of the scale or the size of the palace itself? It must have been huge.
It was huge, but then a lot of it was partitioned off, as you were. We went up the staircase in the morning and it was all gold and all that, but they had these big drippings over it supposed to save it.
Right.
And we actually worked in the ballroom.
Uh-huh. And was it partitioned off within the ballroom, or was it one big open space?
Well, the ballroom was one big open space,
Mhm.
but then there was other offices where the interpreters and downstairs again different, you know.
And was it very noisy to work, and was there much sound of the typing and people
Oh no,
talking?
no, there wasn't really much typing in it
Right.
because it was a case of interpreters doing what they were, and then the plotting and filing the things
Right.
in the library, you know.
Right.
So there wasn't an awful lot of typing to be
Right.
done.
And just it's a very mundane question, but was there a canteen for the staff, or what way did you?
Yes, the harems down below.
Right.
That's quite true. And that they were converted into our tea rooms, you know, just for snacks at 11 o'clock. We went down there and had
I bet you never thought you.
2 annas for a cup of coffee or tea.
Oh dear. Well. What was your working day like? Was it 8:30 or 8 o'clock to 5, or because of the contingencies or the exigencies
No,
of the war?
we
was it
started
an
about
ongoing?
9 in the morning and we finished around about 12, half 12. We had to have 2 hours. We had to go home and lie on our tarpaulins, as they call them, and have a rest. And then we went back in the evening and finished at about 5 o'clock.
And then when you finished at 5, was your time your own, or was it pretty regimented as well?
No, the time was your own.
Right. Well, where did you stay then when you worked in the palace? Did you?
Well,
did you
we
live
worked in Racecourse Camp, and there was big huts,
Mhm.
but they're quite luxurious compared to what we had in England, of course. And we all had a Dobie Wallah, that was an Indian, who looked after our uniforms, and every morning our fresh uniform was laid out on our bed for us. He took it away and was washed and brought back again.
My goodness.
So it was really a life of
A
luxury
life of luxury.
to us.
And he was there for each hut, or for the
Oh yes,
accommodation?
no, we had one Dobie for maybe between 2 of us. They all had different Dobies.
Right. And how did you get on with those manservants then? Were they easy to work with, or were they very invisible? They would just do what you wanted and then disappear and come back with
Oh,
it?
the Indians,
Aye.
oh yes.
Were they good to work?
Oh, they're very good,
Right.
very good. Of course, they didn't speak English or that, and the majority of the girls always give them some extra because, well, they didn't have anything really,
Yes. Well, that's it, of course.
and
And they were quite poor. They were quite poor people.
oh, they're very poor at that time.
Yeah.
And then we also had them in Hyderabad, out here on the veranda. They had these mesh things, and they came round every so often with water to spray them to keep the temperature down.
My goodness.
So
Well, you mentioned then when you had been in England, it wasn't as luxurious. You trained in England initially,
I didn't do any training really.
did you not?
I was born in Carrickmore, and it was only a small village in those days, and you knew everybody in it. And then when I was about 12, 14, I went to school in Larne. And then in Easter of 41, was it? The Germans came over and bombed Belfast.
Yes.
And then my mother came and took me home because she thought it was too dangerous. And of course I missed my friends and I missed everything. And I thought, well, I'm not going to stay here, I'm going to join the WAAF. So up I went to Belfast, to Clifton Street on my I was too young then, but I went on my 18th birthday. And I joined the WAAF, and I was given my number, which was 2097175. And they took your details, what you did, and all this, and I just said at a school, and that was fine. Anyhow, in October, which was very, very cold weather, I got my rail warrant to go via the Haitian boat to Cheltenham. And when we arrived at Cheltenham, there was a lot of, an influx of other girls who were joining up from different parts of the country all over. I didn't know any of them. Then we went out to this hut. They had a big lorry, and we all piled into the lorry and went out, and we got into this hut, and there was a big stove, I can see it yet, in the middle of the hut, and the fumes and the smell would poison you. So anyhow, then we were allocated our bed, and it was an iron bedstead with these biscuits and sheets and blankets, and it had to be folded up like a sandwich every morning, and everyone had to be the same. So that was fine. We were then given a big enamel mug and our irons, which was a knife, fork and spoon, and we're told if you lose that, it's just too bad, you'll have to eat with your fingers, you know. So anyhow, then from there on, we next day or so we sort of settled in, and then we were given our uniform. And our uniform was big black shoes, and 2 pairs of big thick grey stockings in our uniform, and our underwear. And our underwear our knickers were big, called passion killers.
Big bloomers almost.
They came down to your knee. So in the morning then, Sergeant RAF chap, he took us at 6:30. You had to be out on the square in these bloomers and your shirt. And we did PE for about an hour or more. And then we went back and had our breakfast, and then we out again on the square doing marching and saluting and all. That went on for 6 weeks. And then at the end of the 6 weeks, we were all called in and what you did and what you didn't do, and I was allocated as secretarial work. And that was all the training I ever had.
But they must have been assessing you then as you were training for the 6 weeks.
Oh, they probably were.
And they were identifying that you could do this and somebody...
Yes.
Right.
I expect
Did any of the girls get homesick, or...
Oh, yes, quite a few.
It must have been hard on them.
The first night you could see all the sheets going up and down.
Oh, no. But was there a lot of camaraderie between the girls, though? Did they gel together well?
Oh, very much so.
Yeah.
Even when I came back, I missed so much, because we were all one common denominator, as it were, and we all had the same amount of money. If you didn't have it, if I spent all my money and was wanting to go somewhere, somebody else would give you 6pence to go. You know, this sort of way. Yeah. It really was terrific.
It's a matter of interest. When you got paid, was the money given to you in cash, or was it put into an account for you?
Oh, in cash.
Right. It wasn't sent home, or it was.
No.
It was yours.
No.
Right.
We were paid every fortnight, and you marched up to the desk. You said 175. That was my last 3 numbers, and you saluted, and then they give you a couple of pounds, whatever it was. I can't remember now, but it wasn't very much.
So the war was in full flow or in full flight at that stage.
Oh,
that
yes,
was 1941. And did news of the war filter down to you, or how did you find out what was happening? Was it by the radio or by the newspapers or by the RAF men telling you what was going on?
We had all these maps up on the wall, and we had the radios, of course. There was no television in those days, and you sort of, well, everybody listened to the news and heard what was happening, you know.
Yes.
So,
What was it like for a young girl then, you know, in the midst of that? You know, you've been relatively innocent at 18 or 19 years of age.
We were very naive, and we weren't like the young ones today.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you how naive I was, as well as the rest of them. I was only there for a short time when my sister decided she was getting married, and I came back to Carrickmore, and at that time the Americans just had arrived. And anyhow, big-hearted me, I went and I said to them, said they were coming over for furlough to Northern Ireland. They'd never been before. And I said, oh, well, I'm coming home. I said, you're all welcome to come to my home, you know. And there were 6 of them. But when I went and told my mother, she said, where do you think I'm putting 6? But anyhow, the next morning I went out to meet some guests coming off the train, and only one American turned up. And his name was called Homer Cunningham. Now, Homer Cunningham was stationed in Salisbury, and at that time I was in Reading. And he stayed for a week, and my parents did the best for him, you see. And he knew what type of family we were and all this sort of thing. So anyhow, when I got back to my unit, there was a letter from him to say that he appreciated the hospitality and he would like to return it. So he said, would I come one weekend to Salisbury? So off I went to Salisbury, and it was, I can't remember the name of the hotel now, but anyhow I went up to the desk and I was standing there, and he'd booked this single room. Well, you can guess what I was like. I nearly fainted. And I said, in no way, I said, I'll get the last train back. I said, I would not stay in the hotel that. And we argued and we fought. And I went up to the room and I got the wardrobe and all the heavy furniture, and I banged it on the door. I got up the next morning about 6 o'clock and I got the first train back to Reading. Well, that's how naive now. They wouldn't do it today, would they? When I got back and told the girls, they all had a real good laugh, you know, but said, well, we would have not done exactly the same.
Poor Homer.
So never tell him. So.
No. Well, so how long did you spend in that part of England then? But in 6 weeks in the training, and then you were allocated your post?
I was allocated to do pay accounts in Penarth, and I went, but I failed the course. And then I was posted to Reading, and it was part of Flying Training Command, and we were called 50 Group. Our building was Sylvester's. It was a private school in its day, but it was taken over then again by the RAF. And from Flying Training Command, we were quite a small unit really, and there, what happened there was where all the young pilots, 18, 20, just leaving school, came in to be assessed if they were all right for flying for pilots and aircrew. And you got to know quite a lot of them. But when I was posted back there, I was posted as secretary to the education officer. Now, the education officer, his duties was to go out to some of these flying training schools to help young fellows, you know, maybe they were struggling with mouths or something like that, to help them. And occasionally I went out with them, and I was very lucky. I was able to see how their training went on a link trainer and all this sort of thing, you know.
How long did they train to become a pilot?
It would be about three to 4 months on the flying training, and then they went probably to a squadron, and then they'd more training to do there. But it was very sad because you got to know quite a lot of them, and then the next thing you heard when they were on duty, they were killed, you know. So it was mixed with sadness.
It must have been, and for somebody so young, you know, so full of life, and to see these young men, young boys,
Yes,
basically,
exactly.
who had so much to live for,
Uh-huh.
and to give their lives up, you know, and it must be so. And at that age, you know, when you're so, I think, impressionable, you know, it must have weighed very heavily, you know, and there'd been an element of fun, but there must have been that great sadness, you know. You know.
Well, when we went to Reading, you see, we were all in private billets because there was no camp or anything there. And then as time went on, they take over this, was really a mansion of a house, and we all came in, and then they got staff to look after us, you know, cooks and cleaners and all this sort of thing. So I always remember in the summer of that year, when the Lancasters were going over bombing, we took our beds out onto the lawn and we could watch them going over, and then we'd count them coming back, you know. It was sad.
Sad, surely.
So
And you must have become so accustomed at night time just to the sound of the planes that you could identify them
you could identify them going over.
by their
They were
sound.
nearly all Lancasters going over.
Well, do you see at that stage, you know, would individual pilots have been known and would have stood out from the rest and would have been talked about as being, you know, they almost became heroes, even at that stage? You know, say, I'm thinking of the likes of Douglas Bader. Well, of course, it was maybe later on in the war. But would there have been pilots that would have been known for their exploits or for their bravery,
Well, it's
whose
probably,
name would have been passed down
Yeah.
amongst you?
well, probably the older generation of pilots, you know,
Yeah.
ones that were maybe in the 30s and
Yes.
not so much the young
The young
ones.
ones, they were just young men out.
They
there.
were just young
My
men.
goodness.
Uh-huh.
What could you describe what the pilots looked like, you know, the uniform?
Well, they were just in blue, and they wore their brevet here, whether an air gunner or a navigator or a pilot. But they had to work for those brevets.
And then, how long did you spend there
In Reading,
in Reading?
I would say about 18 months maybe.
And then
Oh.
from Reading then?
I went to. But while we were in Reading, as I say, we're only a very small unit. Our commanding officer insisted we all went up on, in an aircraft, and at that time it was a Carrickmore, and each one was taken to their, you know, it's your turn today or tomorrow and so on. And I remember going, I'd never been in an airplane in my life, and Flight Lieutenant Gittins, he was the pilot, he went out and he strapped me in, you see, and he went up, he looped the loop, he did everything, and when I came down, I thought I was green, and he just said to me, well, what do you think of that? I said, it was great. And I just daren't, I thought it was the usual thing that happened, you see, I couldn't contradict him.
The Tiger Moth, was that not quite a flimsy
Oh,
aircraft?
that was only a wee training plane. It's only a two-seater thing.
And looking back on it, were they doing that just for the fun?
Oh, just for
Just
the fun.
to
yes,
see how
yeah.
brave you were?
Oh, exactly. Like all the rest of the WAAF and all over never got up. We were privileged to have done that, you know.
Right. Despite the sickness and that and the nerves. So then you left Reading and then to Hyderabad.
Yes. They asked for volunteers for overseas, but they didn't tell us where, and it could have been Egypt, it could have been anywhere. So of course I volunteered. And I, at that particular time, was home on leave in Carrickmore. And I got a telegram this morning to say, report back to your unit immediately. So I went straight back, and there it said you're on embarkation leave.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't tell us where we were going, and it didn't tell me. I was the only one out of the unit that was going. They didn't tell me where I was going or anything. So anyhow, got a clearance check and got you had to sign that everything was okay. And then I went to West Kirby, and in West Kirby then we were given all these jabs, various inoculations thing, and I always remember getting a yellow fever one. I don't know if you've ever had it or not.
No.
Just yellow fever, it made me jump sky high. Oh, I was terribly ill afterwards. But anyhow, we were sorted out then with our tropical kit, and were given big canvas kit bags, and we were there for a couple of weeks. Well, no, about a fortnight, I think. And then one night during the night, we were told to scramble and get ready, and we were put in this lorry and were driven to Glasgow. That time we didn't know where we were, and we boarded this ship called the Stratherd, and we sailed in convoy, still not knowing where we were going. So we went through the Suez Canal, and they let us off at Port Tufik for stretcher legs for a couple of hours, and we sailed on, and we were about 6 weeks before we reached Bombay. So anyhow, when we reached Bombay, we struggled off the ship with our kit bags and the heat and the flies. Oh, it was awful. And we got on this train. Now the train was big wooden seats, and Indians were on top of on the roof of the train. They were everywhere. So we were given K rations. That was our food for. It took us all day to get to Delhi. So we got to New Delhi, and there on the platform was all the airmen, and they cheered, and some of them hadn't seen a British girl for years, well, since the beginning of the war. So then from there we went to Race Course Camp, and we were sorted out to what jobs we did and so forth.
Right. Well, when you were on the ship for 6 weeks, what did you do? Were you still working, or were you expected to
Oh no, we weren't.
It was just relax as best you could.
We're in sort of hammocks, And
it must have been so boring.
Oh, it was terrible. But some of the girls that were going out were sick the whole journey out.
Right.
I was lucky, I was okay.
Right.
But it was absolutely crowded, with soldiers and airmen and
And it would have been just hot and balmy, and night time would have been quite warm.
It was awful. You weren't allowed to smoke on the deck, or no lights or anything like that.
And it also must have been distressing that you didn't know where you were going.
No.
You were away. Your family didn't know where you were.
No.
So
and
there
then
was no
that was another
communication.
thing. You weren't allowed to write and tell them where you were or anything. Your letters were always censored. If you wrote a letter, it was censored before it was posted. And if you mentioned any place at all, that was all marked out.
Right. Just in case it got into the wrong hands.
Exactly.
So when did you actually hear that you were going to be based in Hyderabad? When did you know that then, as you went up to Delhi? Did you know where you were going?
No.
It was only when you arrived?
When we arrived,
you were told?
And we sorted out in the huts. He came round and they said, you're going to CPIC, Hyderabad, and you're going to the Secretariat, and, all the different places. So, they all said you were the lucky ones that got to Hyderabad.
Right.
They went up to the Secretariat, they were all secretarial work up there.
Yes.
And
can you remember your first day in the palace? What did you think when you saw it? It must have seemed like a fairy tale.
It was just a fairy tale.
The Arabian Nights or something.
Of course, we were the first WAAF to go in there, but some of the airmen were already there, you see. But they were very good to us, and sort of helped us to settle in.
And did many of your friends from your initial training go to Hyderabad with you? It was just the three of you?
The three of us
and that
went.
was it? Quite a tight unit.
But then, of course, as time went on, then the more girls came out.
You get to know others and that. What was life like in Hyderabad? What was social life like? Was it a good place to be with dances or Did you have cinema at all by any chance?
Oh no, nothing in the palace. It was
Nothing.
just the offices it were, you know.
Oh, right.
Uh-huh.
So that was purely business.
That's purely business.
And then, what
of
did
course,
you
I
do
had tennis courts
Mm-hmm.
and that sort of thing which you could have used.
Right. What about polo? Horse polo, the polo that they played on the horses. Did you ever see
that wasn't played in Hyderabad.
Right, right. And what about swimming? Was that available at all? Could you swim at all, or?
Well, I never did swim.
Right, so it didn't matter. And what about dances? Was that low key because it was India, or could you avail of dances?
You went into the inner circle and they had lovely restaurants there, and all round was afternoon tea dances, as they called them.
Mm-hmm.
And you sat on the veranda round, and then the band played and you could go out and dance. But there was no such thing as dancing at night or that sort of thing,
I see.
you know.
Yeah, I see you have a picture of Lord Louis Mountbatten.
Mm-hmm.
Was he there?
Oh no, he wasn't in India.
He wasn't.
No.
When did you worked for him? Did you?
I did. I went then. You see, when the war finished, our CPI there was no further use for us. You see, when the deputies surrendered, the war more or less was over.
Yes.
Well, we became redundant. There was no use for us then, you know.
Right.
And I was posted then to Ceylon, and I stayed there in Candy for about a couple of weeks. I was supposed not knowing what to do with it. And then I was posted to Singapore.
Mm-hmm.
And in Ceylon, we were combined operations at that time, which meant it was Army, Navy and Air Force. And Lord Louis was the chief, he was Supreme Commander. So they picked 2 ATS, 2 RENs and 2 WAAF. That was 6 of us. And we got our word to go, we were going to Singapore. And we went on his aircraft, his private aircraft called the Mercury. And we arrived in Penang, and I suppose the brass hats were all out thinking it was Louis' plane that he had come
But he
on.
was there.
And when these 6 wee innocent lassies walked off. But anyhow, I must say they gave us the BI treatment that night. They took us out to dinner and they just really celebrated.
Lovely.
And then the next day we went on to Singapore. Now, I was billeted in Ardmore Flats, a big block of flats where the Japanese had been living in. And then the 6 of us, we were put into the gate lodge of Government House. Now, in Government House, Lord Louis and his wife Edwina were living there. So we set up the office in the gate lodge and worked there for about 3 or 4 weeks, maybe more. And then we eventually moved to Cathy Buildings, which was above a cinema. And then from there on, of course, the staff increased. We had Navy, Army and Air Force, sailors, with everything. And then we were put on watches. You know, we did 6-hour watch. And I was allocated as a top secret typist.
So then, did you finish then in April '46?
No.
Well, you must have.
I went on to August. I came back on the 13th of August. I remember on the Monarch or from Maruda, and that was the ship.
Then back to England,
Back
and
to
then
England.
and then back to.
And then I was demobbed up in West Kirby.
Right.
And I came back to Carrickmore not knowing what I was going to do. I missed everybody and it was awful. Yeah. And the next thing then, I got word to go for interview for Stormont. And I went then to the Ministry of Finance and had digs in Belfast. and I was so miserable. I just cried myself to sleep at night.
Yes.
And anyhow, I got my pay and I spent it on my rail ticket home to
Right.
Carrickmore, and my father had to pay me. But then time went on, and I eventually got transferred to the Labour Exchange in Dungannon, which wasn't so bad.
Nearer home. It was nearer home. But I mean, after the excitement of England and India and Singapore, to go back to dreary Belfast, it must have been.
It was
It
dreadful.
was just like the end of the world, I would say. You know.
And to go up in Stormont, it was a great big office, and it was freezing in the winter time. And nobody ever spoke. We all,
Worked away. Well, tell me about Lord Louis. What kind of a figure was when you saw him? Could you describe him? I mean, he was a handsome man.
He was handsome.
Was he tall?
He was tall, thin, and everybody fell for him.
Mhm.
He just was really.
He was a charmer.
He was a charmer.
He was a charmer. You know.
Uh-huh. But the type of him was. Now he was on the 9th floor, and our office was on the 7th. And I remember going up on the lift, and he was in it, and he says, "Come on, there's room for all of us." That was the type of him. He wasn't either supremo.
Yes. Because I mean, I'm fascinated by him because, the circles that he moved in Hollywood, with Charlie Chaplin and Mary Pickford and Douglas Fairbanks, and also the friendship with Noel Coward when he made In Which We Serve, and he wore Lord Louis' the hat to the helmet and that, and he must have been a very clever man.
Oh, he was.
And he had the
But it
common
was a
touch.
funny marriage,
I think, yes.
Oh, it was.
I get that.
Because at that particular time she was doing a line with Handed Marrow.
That's right.
Because he came to Singapore, and everybody was out cheering and said, "Oh, here's a doing his boyfriend," So, but she worked in the Red Cross.
Yes.
And some of the girls would have to come up and take notes for her, and do typing. But she was. You couldn't compare her with him.
He had the common touch, and yet he was very regal, I think.
Oh,
but he
very
had the there was something about him that it was very human that he could talk to.
Now the night he left Singapore to go back to get the freedom of London.
Yes.
And so many of the staff were invited to go out, and I went out with General Denning, I think. And he went round everyone that was there and shook hands and thanked us for all we had done. That was the type of thing.
Yeah.
And that was the last job I did in the office, was type the freedom of London for him. And I've still got a copy somewhere among my souvenirs.
My goodness. He was a marvellous man, he had a great dignity to him, and a great bearing.
He wrote me a letter, somewhere among the things.
My goodness. But what a life. And that you have had, and up until you're only in your early 20s.
That's right.
And that's so much packed into it. It was absolutely amazing. And to go back to Belfast, where my aunts worked in Stormont, and they worked there, and one worked in Stormont, and one worked in Post Office House.
Oh, that's
she worked there as well, and I worked there one summer myself. And
Where, in Stormont?
Up in Stormont, the Castle Buildings, as it was, and I can just visualise your coming out to land there after being in the, that.
Well, I was in Diggins and Castlereagh and Mrs. Morey, and she lived with her brother, and she was very nice, but she sort of. When I arrived, she says, "Now, no boyfriends to call here," and all this was laid down. And I remember meeting a girlfriend of mine, Dorothy, and I hadn't seen her for years. She wasn't in the service. And we went out, and of course we had a few drinks, and I came up and flew up the stairs. Oh, I said, "I've an awful headache. Do you want any supper?" No, I've got an awful headache. Terrified that she'd have noticed. So And
Oh,
to come back to that, you know.
it would be just like the rug being taken away from under you, you know. But you come back to Dungannon and then back to Omagh.
I went back to Dungannon and then met
Back
my
to-
husband,
Right.
Olsen. He was off out of the Navy, and he was trainee teacher,
Mm.
and he was in Carrickmore in the retirement school
Mm-hmm.
doing his
Teaching
his
training,
training,
aye.
and that's how I met him.
Where did he train to be a teacher? Did he train in Belfast?
He trained in Belfast.
In Belfast.
Mhm.
And then when he did his probationary in Carrickmore, where did he work then? Did he come to
Well,
Omagh?
he did his training, and then he went back to Londonderry, and he got a post in Bennett Street,
Right.
in Foyle Road,
Uh-huh.
and then we just lived in. I don't know. You knew Londonderry.
No, I just
There's a huge big house in the corner of John Street.
Yes.
That's where we lived. There was about 4 floors in it,
Uh-huh.
and of course the brothers were monumental sculptors.
Right.
Do you remember Dick Ward? Do you?
Oh yes.
Well, Dick was a brother, you see.
I see.
And he had the business in Omagh, and Vin had the business in Londonderry.
Right.
So then, of course, he got the job as adjutant in the specials,
Mm-hmm.
and then that folded up when he went back to teaching in
Mhm.
the high school here.
Mm-hmm. And what did he teach? What was his subject?
I think it was geography,
Geography.
and careers master.
Right. Right. And how long did he teach in the high? Did he
Oh.
teach there for then the rest of his teaching
Well,
career?
Yeah, but then he took various strokes, you see, and he died. He must be 30 odd years or more then.
Yes. Right.
79. something
79.
like that. How long was that?
That's
34 years.
34 years. That's the year I started teaching. 1990. I taught in 1979.
He was only 50, 51, 52.
My goodness. My goodness.
Mhm.
That cousin I've discovered, her sister had a stroke, and she was in her late 40s, and she had a doctorate from Trinity College, and remembers nothing about university. So just blank completely. She cannot even communicate now with her family. You know, so you have maintained the auxiliary air force, the women's auxiliary air force. You have that connection, of course. You know.
Oh yes, when I was in Londonderry, I joined the RAF Association,
Mhm.
and I was secretary and president and all in there. And then when I came to Omagh, I joined the Mid-Tyrone branch, as we called it,
Mhm.
and I did very well. I ended up as area chairman for Northern Ireland.
Lovely.
And
But just tell me, looking back at that period in the Second World War, did the RAF see themselves completely separate, as different from the army, and on the navy?
oh yeah.
Would they see in their heads that they were?
Oh
a cut
yes,
above?
yes, we were the boys in blue, the Bill
Yes.
Queen boys. Oh yeah.
And would there have been that swagger?
Oh, there was no doubt about it.
Uh-huh.
I mean, we just felt we were superior to the army.
Right, and you just took that as granted for taking that for that was just taken as read. I mentioned some of the RAF heroes. Did you ever meet Douglas Bader? Did you ever see him at all?
No, but I have a letter from Douglas Bader because I invited him to come to one of our dinners in Omagh,
Mm-hmm.
and he was coming, and then he sent another letter to say that something else turned up because
Something
they had to
happened.
come.
Yes.
And I never really met him,
Right. He was an inspirational figure.
He was.
He was. One of the saddest photographs I ever saw was the one taken after the crash where he lost his legs, and you can see the plane in the distance, and then in the foreground, just his 2 shoes.
Uh-huh.
Isn't that so sad?
Uh-huh.
But what an inspirational man he was.
Exactly.
To
carry on.
To carry on, and if anything, it gave him, it increased his stature.
Yeah.
Just that adversity and just But that story is fascinating. Amy, it is just and I am so pleased to have met somebody that knew Lord Louis Mountbatten, because he's a man who fascinates me. Just because of there's something about him, his bearing, and there's something about his character. You know, I just
you just had to look at him, you know, and you felt really.
There was something about him, you know, and maybe it was the film star good looks.
Exactly.
Whatever, you know.
And unfortunately, I was in America. That was just after Olsen died, my husband.
Yes.
And my girlfriend Dorothy, she was living in Florida, and she said, "Why don't you come out, you know, and have a break?" Because in 1979, my brother died.
Yes.
He was out on a hunt. He collapsed and died. February, my father died. May, my husband died. June, my mother died. That was 4 within 6 months. So Dorothy said, why don't you come out? So Brian was only a wee small boy at the time, and I took Brian, we went out, and her husband was playing golf that day, and he came in this night and he said, I've just heard the rumour. He says, I don't know whether it's true or not, but Lord Louis Mountbatten's been blown up in Sligo. So of course we had the radio on and listened all night. I was, you know, it was like losing a brother.
It was dreadful. It was really dreadful, you know. And at that stage, I was down on holidays with my wife in Kinsale, and within days of Lord Louis' murder, there were posters up condemning it and said, "We do not want to be associated with this." You know, he was an innocent man.
He was.
Walked that you would have thought he was the safest place in the world. And I've known people that would have seen him, and he was out, and you know, they didn't realise it was Louis Mountbatten.
No.
Just this man out in and out of boats, and just and it was appalling. It was dreadful. You know, it was a very sad end for a great man, wasn't it?
Let's read that wee bit.
This is where I have to go under the light now.
Read it out.
It's lovely. An Omagh woman who carried out top secret work under the command of the late Lord Mountbatten in the Far East during World War II has become the first woman in the history of the RAFA to be elected an area chairman. Mrs. Amy Ward was elected to serve in that office at the Association's area conference in Northern Ireland. A member of Mid Tyrone branch, she is also the deputy representative for the area on the Central Council. That is lovely. That is beautiful. Oh, lovely, lovely. You know that life, the life that you have had. You know, when I contacted my cousin who lived in Malaya, the first time I met you, I said, to me, you were an exotic creature because of your background. You know, and what you have said is just the exact same. It is so. It's a fairy tale.
It's unreal.
It is unreal. It is unreal, and it is such a joy to have that on.
You had a happy war. You had a happy war.
What?
A happy war, really.
Oh, happy, yes, indeed. Well, then, of course, while we were in India, we were able to go up to the Himalayas, you know, on holidays.
Yes.
Up to Lower Topa. And it was great with horse riding and all sorts of things up there. Added it. But then, when I was in Singapore, I went to Malaya, because I told you had a lot of cousins that were in the rubber. And Edith Spears, that was her father, who was the big chief in the police out there.
Yes.
His daughter, she was married to a chap called Brown. And when they captured Singapore, of course, most of them tried to get out. Most of the men were taken captives, you know, they were in prison in Changi. But she got away to Australia. But unknown to me, she had this bungalow up in Lower Topa. No, in the Cameron Highlands. And we went on holidays, on leave, you know, we called it leave, and went up to the Cameron Highlands, and I was in this bungalow. Didn't know who owned it or anything about it, But after the war, when it came back, a lot of us got together and, reminiscing our things. And it turned out it was Edith's bungalow that I was in. It was her holiday home.
Right.
And she said, if you had known I had buried a lot of my treasures in the garden.
You could
But was not extraordinary.
My goodness.
And then another coincidence, Squadron Leader York Radley, who was a deputy in Hyderabad. Now, I didn't take any notice of him when I was there, but he left early and he came back and he was lecturing to the troops in Germany. And for some unknown reason, I had a letter from him one day, and I replied and sent that, and never thought anything more about it. But then I moved to London, lived in Hampstead, and this day I was going to Stanmore, and I went out to Boulder Screen, and all the trains coming in and that, and I got into the train, sat down into the tube, and I had, when you have a feeling that somebody's looking at you, I thought, this is odd. So I thought, I'll get out, and I got out at Stanmore, and I went one way, and this man went the other way. And suddenly we both turned like this, stood facing each other, and he says, I think you're Amy Moffat. And I says, I think you're Squadron Leader York Radley. Wasn't of all the trains in London and all the stations, I thought it was really
that's
hilarious.
Lovely. That's lovely. That's
Anyhow,
lovely.
I've seen him quite a few times, and he came up to my flat and we had a meal together and that sort of thing,
Lovely. What a coincidence, and what a, as you say, of all the places to meet and all the trains, just
all
being
the
in the same carriage.
To get in the same carriage, but
The same carriage. Oh yes. Donald's passed me over just a question, and he wants me to ask you about the War Memorial in Omagh. Now, in what aspect then of the?
Do you still go to the War Memorial?
Yeah. The war, for of course, on Remembrance Sunday.
I always went to lay the wreath on behalf of the RAF Association, but up until I had my hip done, I haven't been able to go.
Yes.
So I think Pat Donnelly has done it now.
Must be a very poignant occasion for you, Remembrance Sunday and that.
It is. Well, then you see, in addition to that, I was president of the British Legion for some time. That's the men's, we call it the British Legion, not the women's section.
Right.
But I was also in the women's section as president and all that. And I had a lot to do with the Legion and the Remembrance Sunday, and the poppies and all that.
Yes.
So,
and you mentioned Singapore, and Donald said to you, you had a happy war, but you must have seen, particularly in Singapore, the dreadful effects of imprisonment on poor men.
I've told you all the good stories about it, but I didn't tell you any of the bad ones. Now, for instance, in Ardmore Flats, where we were all eventually billeted, the rats came round, I'm not exaggerating, round the picture rail at night. And we had rat men on duty. It got so bad that I just couldn't. I used to take my clothes in and sleep in the office and get into one of the filing cabinets or anywhere I could put my head down.
Just to escape the rats,
Escape the rats. Apart from that, then I was able to go to some of the sessions they had, for the war crimes in Singapore.
That must have been harrowing.
Oh, it was dreadful.
Dreadful.
When you heard all the various things they did.
Yeah, just unbelievable, and how one nation could be, whatever was in their culture, to make them, but cruelty was accepted.
Well, two of my cousins were in one was commissioned and the other wasn't, in prisoners of war. And he said he never forget walking past, what's his name, Brown, and he was eating a bar of soap. He'd so hungry and had to eat, Oh, it was all
Dreadful. It's just, and it's that those stories in the war that have been hidden, I think, for a long time.
Of course.
But just,
And then, of course, when I was in Reading, I was caught up in bomb blast, you know. And I was blown from one side of the office to the other. So, and then in addition to that, this is a funny story, not to do with the war. I had an aunt who lived in Hendon, Queen's Mansions, and occasionally I would go up, you know. So this weekend if I'd leave, I would go up. And I went up, and at that time the double bugs were going around. And there was Maisie, who had a flower shop down at the bottom of the drive, and Maisie was a typical Londoner, wore the big felt hat, the big shoes, you know. She used to go to Covent Gardens in the morning for her flowers and all that, but her home was in Wimbledon. And my aunt said to her, look, Maisie, she used to sleep on the floor in her shop. She was afraid to go home. And my aunt says to her, look, Maisie, she said, I've got a spare bed. She says, why don't you come up and have a night's rest? So anyway, this night Maisie came up, and the siren went. And from my aunt's flat with Queen's Mansions, it was down the staircase, down the back, you know, and the bins were all out on the back. And Maisie, she came flying out, and the next thing she stuck her head in the bin. And all you could see was Maisie's feet. And said, name of goodness, Mary, Maisie, what on earth are you doing? Well, she said, I'd rather have my head blown, and my backside blown off than the head. And I had to pull her out of the bin and get her into the shelf. Oh, it's some funny stories.
Yeah. Well, you see, when you went back to Carrickmore on leave, what was the attitude like? Did people inquire about the war, or was anybody interested, you know, in what
Not
was
really,
happening?
no.
Because we found the same with another man, Paddy McChrystal, who would go back to 6 Mile Cross. Says the farmers were more interested in the price of potatoes than the war that he was fighting. You know, which I thought was it must have been so hurtful that nobody just didn't put it out of your mind. You know, what were community relations like in Carrickmore? Was it an easygoing kind of place? Was it a friendly
It was
place?
in my day. Everybody was friends, you know, and you knew Miss Healy's in the post office and Peter Fox in the shop and this sort of thing. And you just went up among friends. But then as time went on, it disintegrated, you know.
It did, but there had been that friendship and that kind of camaraderie. You know?
Like my father was a great sportsman. Every Saturday he used to muzzle the ferrets and not shooting. And there was Peter Fox and Jimmy Logue and Father McGilligan, and they all arrived in our house. And while they were muzzling the ferrets and getting ready, I was sent up to the village to get the cartridges. Now I was only about maybe 9 or 10. Now could you do it until today? And I went to Daly's and I got the box of cartridges and came home.
It was a different world.
It's a different world completely.
A different world.
'Tis many's a gay night from dark till daylight I spend with people of high renown. But in all their grandeur and heaps to squander, my heart would wander for sweet Omagh town.